Time now for a look at the latest business news, and we're going to start with a warning over government spending here in France. Our business editor Stephen Carroll is with us to tell us more. Stephen.
Eve, France's public spending watchdog warning that the government response to the Yellow Vest protests risks destabilising their finances. President Macron announced tax cuts and increased wage subsidies in December after weeks of sometimes violent demonstrations. Now, those measures estimated to cost around €11 billion. The Court of Auditors says that it's not clear how they'll be paid for. In its annual report, the court also highlighted inefficiencies at several state-run agencies and companies, although unions have defended certain staff benefits which were singled out for criticism. Cole Stangler has the details.
Insufficient productivity and lax working conditions. That's how France's Court of Auditors described the situation at the Mobilier National, a government agency that produces high-quality tapestries and furniture for state buildings.
If your question is, are we commercially profitable? No, but we are culturally.
It was only one of many state-funded agencies and companies called out by France's public spending watchdog in its annual report. Another source of scrutiny, how the government plans to pay for a series of concessions made in the heat of the Yellow Vest protest movement, including the expansion of a state wage subsidy. The bill for all that, €11 billion.
The more quickly the government can specify revenue sources, the better it'll be. The path forward for 2019 is also complicated by an economic environment that's not quite the same as when the budget was prepared.
At the same time, members of the president's party in parliament say they've already done much to keep spending under control.
The efforts we've already made to keep spending in check are significant, even after the emergency social measures. So we're arriving at a public debt, a public deficit, much more under control than under the previous administration. We can always do better, but it's not going to be with a slash and burn mentality.
France's deficit is expected to hit around 3.5% of GDP this year, just above European guidelines.
The White House has named its nominee to lead the World Bank. David Malpass is a Treasury Department official and Republican who spent much of his career criticising international institutions. The United States' choice is usually confirmed at the top job in the development-focused lender. Mr. Malpass is trying to allay fears over his previously negative comments on multilateralism as he begins a campaign to convince governments around the globe to support him.
I'm very optimistic that we can achieve breakthroughs to create growth abroad that will help us combat extreme poverty and increase economic opportunities in the developing world.
The Chairman and Chief Executive of National Australia Bank have resigned following criticism of their leadership in a report on misconduct in the country's financial sector. NAB was singled out for criticism in the investigation, which looked at issues including lenders charging fees for services that customers didn't receive. CEO Andy Thorburn will step down later this month, while Chairman Ken Henry will retire from his position. Here in France, the lender Societe Generale has cut its earnings targets for next year after a market downturn hit its corporate and investment bank. SocGen now plans to cut €500 million in costs from that division and replace the unit's chief. For the whole of last year, the bank saw net profits rise by 30% to €3.9 billion. Well, let's take a look at how that news went down on the markets. Shares in Societe Generale up 5% at the open in Paris. Gains too for the drinks maker Pernod Ricard after they raised their profit forecast for this year. Despite all that, though, London, Paris and Frankfurt all opening in the red. The CAC 40 down by 0.1%. On the Asian markets, shares in Tokyo finished lower as well. That was despite the telecoms and investment giant SoftBank jumping by almost 18%, the company announcing a major buyback of its shares. South Korean markets are back in business today. Shanghai and Hong Kong still closed. Just we had the unusual situation where South Korea finished flat, but it was, I promise you, trading today. On the currency markets, a euro is trading for around $1.13.5 and just under 88 pence sterling. Well, finally for me, shares in the New York Times jumped by over 10% on Wednesday after it reported a rise in subscribers and revenue. The company added 265,000 new digital subscriptions in the last 3 months of 2018. It now has a total of 4.3 million digital and print customers, and it set a target of 10 million subscribers by 2025. Quarterly revenues at the paper up by 4% to just over $500 million for those last 3 months of 2018. Eve.
OK, Stephen, thanks a lot for that update on all the latest business news.